Ian Brennan.
One of the bedrocks of that success you talked about of our creative industry sector and the music industry and so on is actually the BBC. It provides a hugely positive gravitational pull in that direction. Almost accidental intervention, which has been incredibly successful, really, for our country. We had the new Director General in front of us, Tim Davie, recently. He seemed, I think, to most of the committee like a pretty sensible, pragmatic, former Conservative Party activist, and I think we were all quite impressed with him. And what he said about this consultation on decriminalisation, which some people had thought he might, sort of give way on, was that it didn't pass the logic test. What's your reaction to that?
Well, clearly I've discussed this at length with the Director General. I think it was right that we conducted this consultation into decriminalisation. I do think there are major challenges around decriminalisation, which we can continue to consider, and we will publish our response to the decriminalisation consultation. I am concerned that in doing so, were we to choose to do so, that we do not send a signal that it's acceptable not to pay your TV licence. So I think I'd be concerned about sending signals around non-payment. I also think it shouldn't be there are wider questions around the funding of the BBC from 22 to 2027, and again, we have to consider those points as well.
Am I wrong in sensing in your answer that you're preparing to push back really on number 10 on this and against Dominic Cummings and those whose agenda this is? Simply because it isn't decriminalisation in a way is a misnomer, isn't it? Because it doesn't actually, it won't stop people from having to pay their licence fee, and instead of what actually happens in practice, which is that nobody goes to prison for not paying their licence fee. Sometimes people go to prison for refusing to pay all sorts of fines, and the licence fee might be included in that. But in actual practice, that's not what happens. And in practice, what would happen if you went down this route was you'd have bailiffs knocking at people's doors because they hadn't paid their licence fee. So am I wrong to sense that you are, having looked at the facts, and it's the right thing to do as Secretary of State, having looked at the facts, that you're coming to the conclusion this is probably not a route you want to go down?
Well, first of all, I would take issue with the characterisation of this somehow being a Don Cummings agenda. I've never had I have conversations with him about many things. I've never had a conversation with him once about the BBC or decriminalisation or anything else like that.
So who's been driving it then?
Well, we announced a public consultation on this because the legitimate questions about whether people should ultimately face a criminal sanction. The end result, and I accept the points you're making have been well made during the consultation, that it's not the case that you go to prison straight away if you don't pay your TV licence. It's at the end of a long process. I think it was appropriate that we look at that. The government is now considering its response, but the sort of issues that you've raised are legitimate concerns that have been expressed during the course of this consultation, and we will weigh those up in making a determination.
To just try to understand that a little bit further, if it isn't from, and I accept your explanation, if it isn't from Dominic Cummings and from number 10, how did this, how did this whole thing come about? It wasn't in your manifesto. It suddenly emerged when Nicky Morgan was temporarily Secretary of State after the election and was announced. It sort of came out of the blue, almost as if it looked as if it was a signal of an all-on full frontal attack on the BBC. Really.
Well, I'm afraid I can't account for a decision in that sense that was made by my predecessor. And I'm sure she would have given evidence to this committee as to the nature of that decision. The decision that faces me as Secretary of State is to consider the outcome of that consultation and determine the next steps. I think there are legitimate reasons for doing so, because it is a very legitimate question to ask about whether you should ultimately have a criminal sanction. There are, of course, many other big decisions that we have to take around the BBC, not least the licence fee settlement for 22
that's much more important. But this would cost £200 million a year to the BBC, obviously, so it's not a small matter.
Well, part of the consultation is to understand those figures, and you make an appropriate judgment.
Well, I hope I'm right in sensing in my water that you might be going down the pathway of rejecting this particular proposal. Can you tell the committee when you're likely to be able to publicly say what you're going to do about that? Because it is a cloud hanging over the BBC at the moment.
Yes, well, I mean, I hope to do so in relatively short order. I'm conscious of giving promises that I don't.
You said you do it by the end of the year.
Yes, I stand by that. Yeah,
okay,
I stand by that.